Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. My name is Don Arleth, and you're watching Midday Report here on TVP World. And let's go ahead and get started. At least 20 people were killed and 115 wounded after Russia launched a massive overnight drone and missile attack on Ukraine, striking energy infrastructure and forcing nationwide emergency power cuts. The attack prompted Poland's armed forces to scramble NATO fighter jets to secure its airspace, temporarily closing the airports in Rzeszów and Lublin. Both have since reopened. We now move to Kyiv to our correspondent Oz Chatterjee. Good afternoon, Oz. So, we hear these horrible overnight attacks, and it looks like the worst of it, at least in terms of the civilian toll, were in the western city of Ternopil. So what more can you tell us about these nighttime attacks?
Yeah, 115 people injured overall across the country. However, 66 of those in Ternopil, and that's where the death toll is at the moment. 20 people dead. That's according to the State Emergency Services of Ukraine. However, search and rescue operations are still ongoing, and that number has been rising throughout the day. 2 children are among those who have been killed. Now, it was an attack across wide parts of Ukraine. Western Ukraine hit the hardest with Ternopil, as you're seeing on your screens, but also Ivano-Frankivsk and Lviv right up to the Polish border. Ukrainian authorities say Russia launched 476 drones and 48 missiles overnight. Zelensky, who is currently in Turkey, used the opportunity responding to this to call for further sanctions, sending further aid to Ukraine. So yeah, that's clearly where the Ukrainian government feels that more needs to be done here from their allies. But look, it's been another really difficult day, particularly the energy sector again getting hit in 7 different regions of Ukraine, rolling blackouts in parts of Ukraine as Ukraine struggles to deal with this again, another horrific Russian attack on Ukraine. TVP World's John Todd now has a special report with more.
Emergency crews tackle the remaining fire in a tower block virtually leveled by a Russian airstrike. Dozens of people were killed and wounded in early morning attacks on the far western Ukrainian city of Ternopil. In the northeastern city of Kharkiv, authorities said on Wednesday that at least 32 people were wounded, including 2 children, in Russian drone strikes. Drone and missile strikes on the western city of Lviv forced Poland to scramble its own and allied NATO fighter jets to protect Polish airspace. Residents in Kyiv sought shelter in the capital's metro system as Moscow again targeted the country's energy infrastructure.
They are worse than fascists. I don't know what would have to happen for them to stop this. I don't know. It's kind of surreal. I just don't understand them. We started going down to the subway when debris or shaheds hit near our home. There was a shockwave. It's very scary when you look at that hole in the ground and you can't pull yourself together. Their goal is to destroy our nation, to destroy Ukrainians. They are doing everything they can in order to achieve their goal. You fear for your life and want to feel at peace, but it's very difficult at home. So you have to go to the shelter, regardless of how you feel yourself.
Experts echo this sentiment, saying many in the West have forgotten or are simply unaware of the Kremlin's indifference to the value of human life.
There's a lot of people who don't have that memory of Russia, and frankly, there was 15 years or something after the Soviet Union when people thought Russia might be a country that could be part of the international community, and they weren't. They aren't. They're a culture that thrives on death. They're a death cult.
The overnight onslaught comes as Politico reported that 2 top US Army officials, including Army Secretary Dan Driscoll, have made a rare unannounced wartime trip to Kyiv, aiming to revive stalled peace talks with Russia. US news site Axios reported earlier that Washington and Moscow had been secretly working on a new draft plan to end Moscow's war in Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky is due to meet the US delegation on Thursday, following his Wednesday trip to Turkey, where he's expected to meet US envoy Steve Witkoff as he attempts to reactivate the diplomatic peace process and push for a resumption of prisoner exchanges. On the front line, Ukraine's general staff reported that its armed forces had successfully launched US-made ATACMS supersonic tactical missiles at Russian military infrastructure. The announcement followed the Tuesday night approval by the US of the potential sale to Ukraine of upgrade and sustainment packages intended for Patriot air defense systems valued at $105 million. According to the State Department, the deal will improve Ukraine's ability to meet current and future threats as Russia continues to strike the country daily.
In the wake of unprecedented Russian sabotage attacks on Polish railways over the weekend, Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski addressed the Polish parliament today. Sikorski said that Russia will have to face consequences for its actions, which will go beyond diplomatic measures. During his speech, the foreign minister also criticized the president and the opposition for suggesting, at a moment like this, that the European Union is the threat rather than Russia. Ovidiusz Nicheja has more.
The Polish foreign minister has called the recent railway sabotage in Poland an act of state terrorism by Russia. On Wednesday, Radosław Sikorski, Poland's foreign minister, who is also Poland's deputy prime minister, addressed the parliament to talk about these recent acts of sabotage, and he has condemned them strongly and said that Poland's response to them will go beyond diplomatic measures.
This time, this wasn't just sabotage like before. This was an act of state-sponsored terrorism with a clear intention to cause human casualties. We will respond to this, and not just diplomatically.
Radosław Sikorski has also devoted a substantial part of this address to criticizing Poland's President Karol Nawrocki. Foreign Minister Sikorski says that President Nawrocki is embracing an anti-Western narrative at a time when Poland faces serious and increasing threat from the East, and therefore he's misinterpreting the real danger.
You are not helping the EU or Poland's case when you insinuate that European integration is a conspiracy directed against Poland. You are setting the stage for Poland's exit from the EU. You do not represent Poland's perspective when you speak in anti-EU fashion. You only represent your own views and those of your office. The enemy is whoever sent the saboteurs with a mission to murder Polish people.
The presidential office has issued a response to the statements from Foreign Minister Sikorski.
The EU is far from what many Poles, myself and the Polish president would like it to be. We want a bloc that makes space for freedom and sovereignty of its members, not a bloc that resorts to decrees and dictates that are impossible to contest. We want a bloc that will allow Poland to play an active role, to have a voice, not a bloc that only listens to what Berlin has to say.
The Polish government has announced that as a retaliation for the acts of sabotage, it will close the last remaining consulate of the Russian Federation in Poland, located in the port city of Gdańsk, and also will restrict the movement of Russian diplomats in Poland. From Warsaw for TVP World, Ovidiusz Nicheja.
Polish authorities have detained the first individuals in connection with the railway track sabotage. Interrogations and further investigations are currently underway. So what do we know so far, and what exactly happened? Our reporter Paweł Trzaskowski has more.
Polish railways became a target of Russian sabotage operations over the weekend. Tracks leading eastward were sabotaged by Ukrainian citizens on the Kremlin's payroll.
They are two citizens of Ukraine who have worked with Russian intelligence for some time now. That has been established by our investigators and prosecution in cooperation with our allies.
The first act of this, to quote Foreign Minister Sikorski, state-sponsored terrorism took place in the village of Mika, about 90 kilometers from the Polish capital. This piece of track was damaged by a remotely detonated explosive charge on Saturday evening. A second explosive was also planted but failed to go off, which most likely prevented a massive disaster in the form of a derailed train. Almost 24 hours later and 50 kilometers further, the police were informed about another incident. A train carrying 475 passengers had abruptly stopped. A metal clamp that could derail the train had been attached to one of the tracks.
A certain line was crossed. We could have seen a terrible tragedy with many victims. That's what I mean by crossing a line. The situation is very, very serious.
The investigators were able to identify the suspects by tracing a SIM card found in a phone that perpetrators had left behind to record the blast. The data revealed that immediately after the incident, the two perpetrators fled the country to Belarus, Russia's closest ally. The perpetrators are already known to the Polish authorities. A fingerprint secured at the site matched Ukrainian criminal databases. That discovery led the investigators to uncover the second suspect. Warsaw is calling on Belarus and Russia to hand over the perpetrators. Moscow, unsurprisingly, denies any involvement. Polish security services have already detained several individuals in connection with acts of sabotage, and further arrests cannot be ruled out. Also, the Polish Prime Minister has requested that Ukraine cooperates in the exchange of information relevant to the incident, and the incidents are making waves in the EU as well.
I start with the Monday's attack on Polish railway track, which highlights the unprecedented risk to European transport infrastructure. Russia's attacks have become increasingly brazen.
A diplomatic source told TVP World that the sabotage attacks in Poland will be the subject of EU foreign ministers' meeting set for tomorrow.
The European Union is modernizing its military transport. The European Commission has presented a new plan today. The initiative aims to shorten the time it takes to redeploy troops from the west to the east from several weeks to just a few days. This is a response to the growing threat from Russia and years of neglected transport infrastructure. We now move to Brussels to our EU correspondent, Angela Skujins. Good afternoon, Angela. So what exactly does this plan include, and how does the European Union intend to implement it?
Good afternoon, Don. So yes, the European Commission laid bare their proposal this afternoon. It comes with a 17.65 billion euro proposed pot of cash, as well as a plan. The 27 EU heads of states need to come together and identify 500 hotspot projects from across the continent that need to be renovated. We're talking about ageing bridges that need to sustain heavy tanks full of soldiers or trucks carrying dangerous fuels. This will then feed into 4 corridors that need to be prioritised for the transport of troops. You mentioned there earlier the plan hinges on really slimming down the transport time from 45 days it takes to get from those troops to move from west to east to just 3 days. Now, the policy document makes it quite clear the need to do so. It states that Russia's invasion of Ukraine grinds into another year, and the threat of this bleeding over into the European territory becomes ever more paramount. However, the European Commissioner for Transport, Apostolos Tzitzikostas, estimated that it should cost roughly 100 billion euros to fix up these projects, which leaves much to the rest of those European capitals to fund the rest of the bill. This was reiterated by the European Commissioner for Defence, Andrius Kubilius, who said that the member states need to step up when it comes to their defence.
Not do everything what member states need to do. We are coming with our assistance, but that does not remove responsibility of member states.
Now, in terms of implementation, the Commission published it today. It will go to a European Council meeting in December, voted on by those EU heads of states before being litigated in the European Parliament. The deadline is set for 2030, but questions do hover here regarding whether this will be delivered on time.
All right, Angela Skujins reporting there from the Belgian capital, and of course, a big pot of cash. It seems like the European member states are going to have to find a lot more to continue that. Thank you for that report. Now, Poland is becoming one of Europe's most dynamic emerging markets for offshore wind energy. The Baltic Sea is set to transform into a major renewable energy hub, with the country preparing to power millions of homes with cheap, clean electricity in the coming years. We now go live to our correspondent, Aisha Abachi, who is following the story. Good afternoon, Aisha. So what's the latest?
Good afternoon, Dawn. Well, at the beginning of the service, we were talking about energy security in Ukraine. Well, this is precisely the topic here today. I'm at the Poland Offshore Wind Energy Conference, and the topic is how to transform Poland's energy security and how to make a more independent, sovereign energy mix for the country for the upcoming years. And why it's important? Well, we can see that there are a lot of dangers out there with imported fuels, namely the insecurity coming from Russia. But this is also about powering millions of Polish households with clean energy, moving away from old energy sources like coal. But this is also very, very important for the technological advancement of Poland, because big, massive AI factories are right now being built in Poland, and these factories will be requiring lots of energy, and officials here are also hoping that wind power will be able to supply these emerging technologies. Now, here's what the Minister of Digital Affairs of Poland, who was at the conference today, had to say about the topic.
Today, Europe as a whole is too reliant on fossil fuel imports. Poland has paid one of the highest prices for its dependence on Russian gas. We're now in the midst of a creeping trade war, which likewise leaves us exposed to unnecessary risks and danger, which is why committing to joint European projects based on European know-how and European technologies is absolutely crucial.
So as you can hear, we had a little mix-up, but anyways, the topic is building independent energy security and sovereignty for Poland, and Poland is also very much cooperating with other European capitals to secure that future. Back to you in the studio, Don.
All right, Sabotage reporting there from Warsaw. Thank you for that report. And for the rest of you, that concludes this edition of Midday Report. Thanks for joining us, and hope to see you next time. Goodbye.